What's going on, everybody? This is Chris Noggle, and welcome to the show. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey to what a dreamer's life looks like, what a visionary's life looks like. And I'm going to focus specifically on my story. I never get to talk to you all about how that journey looked. The journey that started when I was a kid to become a pro snowboarder. So before we get into that, I want to talk about all of your journeys to becoming a rebel banker. That journey is filled with all sorts of ways to get knowledge. You're on podcasts, you're on webinars, and you're getting a whole bunch of knowledge. But the one thing I want to clarify is it's not the knowledge that's the important part. It's the application of the knowledge. That's what matters. I wouldn't be where I'm at if I didn't apply the knowledge that I've learned along the way. And also, I wouldn't be where I'm at without the failures that I've had to go through. But you can skip the failures by just learning and applying the knowledge that you gather. And I'm going to test that. I want to give you something for free. So I've got this brand new booklet. It's Drifting Away from Traditional Car Buying. It's a guide that basically tells you how to get all the money back for all the cars you're ever going to buy driving home. When I was on my journey to becoming a pro snowboarder, one thing I'll never forget, which I'll talk about, is how badly I wanted an Audi. And I loved these cars, but I couldn't afford them. So it was a quest to figure out how to get them, but I didn't know how to get all the money back for all the Audis that I bought. And you can, because you can get that booklet for free. Just go to chrisnoggle.com and click the Wealth Webinar Series, which is a weekly webinar we do. And as soon as you click to register, there's no cost. We will send you that booklet for free. That is how you take action on knowledge. I just gave you the knowledge of what you can learn, and you just got to take action. But let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about my story. So when I was a kid, I grew up in a lower middle class family. My dad was an alcoholic. My mom had to raise me. It was a huge struggle for her. I'll never forget, she had a hard time putting food on the table sometimes, let alone keeping the roof of our 2-bedroom, 700 square foot house on Sunset Drive in Lockport, New York, over our head. And in growing up like that, there was a lot of things that maybe I wanted. There was a picture of a Porsche on the wall, just like every young boy has. And one of the big things I always wanted was when I first was turned on to snowboarding by my friend Jack. We rode 4-wheelers and dirt bikes together, and we skateboarded together. And he was the first that I knew that had been snowboarding. And he comes over with his new board, and we're out in my mom's garage, and we're just bouncing around on this thing. And I'm like, oh my God, this is cool. And then he started showing me some videos, some old videos with Craig Kelly, who was a legend. He's passed away in an avalanche, but he was the legend back in the day. And people like Teddy Hawkinson as the journey continued. But the thing I never will forget is that initial moment where I was like, wow, I want that. I'm watching the VHS tape of these professional snowboarders, and I'm like, that is freedom. They're blasting through the snow in Hawaii. They're out in Colorado, just, dropping off of cliffs and hitting jumps. And I'm just like, that's so unbelievable. But I'd never snowboarded in my life, So I had to go through the journey of saying, Mom, I want to snowboard. So that Christmas, my mom bought me a used Look Burt Lamar, which if any of you know anything about snowboarding, we're going way back, and that used Burt Lamar was way expensive for my mom. I think she spent like $150 on it. Plus, then I had to get my Sorel boots and I had to get the outerwear. So that Christmas, she surprised me with a snowboard. And that was the end of it. I had the tool I needed to make this dream happen. But as that dream progressed, the first day I was on the snowboarding hill, truth be told, how I started was not going to the resorts because we didn't have the money to go to the resorts. How many of you have ever wanted to do something, but the means just aren't there? The resources just aren't there. Well, that was my story. So how I did it, I would take that snowboard, I'd walk up the street or ride my 4-wheeler up there, and there was a hill. It was a kind of a dirt bike track down, and there was a hill that went down there. So we'd build jumps, and we'd hit that jump and learn how to do certain tricks, or just mostly crash back then because I didn't even know how to snowboard. And then I remember one day, my best friend Jack said, hey, come to Kissing Bridge, which was our local small resort, and let's go snowboard. I'm like, oh my God, yeah. So I pulled together enough money. Mom gave me a little bit of money, and I drove down with him, and we went snowboarding. And I'll never forget that first run. I sucked. I remember I couldn't figure it out. I just wanted to quit. And I remember getting to the bottom. I'm soaked from sitting in the snow and being wet. And if I'm not mistaken, it was a rainy day. And I'm in the lodge and I'm like, I don't think I can do this. And Jack comes down. He's like, hey, let's do another run. I'm like, I don't know. And he says, listen, I'll take some time this time teaching you how to do this. And that's exactly what we did. He taught me some key fundamentals, some key things that once it clicked, I started to understand it. And then after that, I just progressed. And I kept watching the videos of these legendary pros and what they were doing. And I remember watching them do the tricks. And I would, at school, I'd write down all the tricks and I'd draw pictures of myself doing these tricks, methods and stalefish and 180s and all these things, which today aren't big tricks, but back then those were the pinnacle things you had to do. And I signed up for, in school, we had a ski club. So I signed up for that. So every Sunday I was able to go to the resort. And my mom, I think that was a Christmas present as well. She bought that for me and I was able to go snowboarding. But in the meantime, because that was only once a week, I still wanted to ride and I wanted to learn. So there was this country club by my house. And this country club was built in a ravine. So just picture a ravine, right? And on the ravine going down the hills, there was sand traps. You've been to a golf course, you know what a sand trap is. So I had figured out one day while watching sledders out there, I saw sledders like going from the top of the hill and going through the sand pit, and they were jumping their sleds. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the perfect jump for a snowboard. And I didn't see any snowboarders doing this. So I went to the country club with my board and I built on the back side of the country club where there wasn't a bunch of sledders because I didn't want any distractions and I didn't want people laughing at me because I was still concerned about people like judging me. And I built a jump out of that sand trap. And I'd go there and I'd practice all those tricks that I saw in those videos. And in practicing, I found out that this is so much fun, but I had one restriction, and that was time. When I was going to the country club was during the week, but I had to go to school. So I'd get out of school at 2:30. Mom would basically then, when I got dropped off by the bus, take me to the country club, which was about 10 minutes from my house. So I had about an hour to an hour and a half each day that I went to the country club to master these tricks. Just wasn't enough time. I wasn't in shape enough to actually hit it, run back up the hill, hit it again. So I had to get in shape. So I remember when I get really winded, I'd have to stop and wait until I got my wind back to hit the jump again. And by that time, it was getting dark, and Mom, I heard her beeping the horn. She was over on the other side, ready to pick me up. I'm like, oh my God, I only got 3 runs. So I went home and I started running up and down my backyard to get in shape. And then I remember I signed up for wrestling in school because I knew during the off season in wrestling, they did a lot of running and it was good conditioning. So I got in really good shape. The next time I went to that country club, I had a longer list of tricks because I'd watched more videos that season. Because every year after the snowboard season, we went into withdrawal. But we basically just went into video watching mode. Me and Jack and some of my other friends like Ben and Billy, we'd just sit down and we'd watch VHS tapes of our favorite pro snowboarders doing even better tricks than they did the year before. And we got all these new ideas, but then we had to practice. So what we would do is we'd go to the country club and we'd build this jump. Usually it was just me. We'd build this jump and I would run up the hill. I had more stamina than all my friends and I just got more runs. I got more hits. It's just like so many of the other people that you've seen that have become legends. What they did is they just did what everybody else was unwilling to do. They got more runs. They spent more time in the computer lab if you're Bill Gates. They spent more time on the court if you're Michael Jordan. They just did what everybody was unwilling to do. And that's what I did. I was so driven to become a pro snowboarder. And I knew I didn't have the luxury of just going to the resort and practicing on a real mountain. So I had to actually improvise and become resourceful. And me becoming resourceful is simply getting in better shape, hitting this jump out of the sand trap. I literally can envision it today. There was like a little shed at the top of it. It was a really steep hill, and the sand trap was perfect because it just had a really, really steep thing. You'd go into it and you'd pop out and you got a ton of air. And I'd learned every tricks. And I remember when I got to the point where I had to learn inverted tricks, I was really scared because it was hard. It was, a lot of times we went to the country club, there wasn't even enough snow. So we were riding on part dirt, part grass, part snow. We would take snow from other parts of the hill, bring it over just so we had an in run to the jump. But the landing, there wasn't enough snow to make that landing perfect. So it turned into mud. I didn't care. It was all about doing the trick and mastering it. And that's what I did. And as this progressed, I started then being able to take those tricks I'd learned at that country club and then take them to the real hill every Sunday for that the ski trip that I would do, the school ski club, and I'd get to practice on real jumps. And I got pretty good. And then I started competing. And my mom would drive me to the hill now, and she'd walk up the hill and watch me compete. And, at the first couple of competitions, I was so scared. It's just like, you get there and there's all these other riders and they're doing these big tricks and older guys, and you're like, okay. And you just got into the groove, but you were scared to like fall and everything else. But then you got over that really quick, because some of those older riders would kind of be like, yeah, man, you got it. Get up there. Let's do it again. And then you watch them and you start mimicking what they did. And you see, this is how it all manifests. But you see, it started with that dream, that day in the garage with Jack, bouncing around on that snowboard. I got the idea. I got the dream, like, I want this. And then seeing the path. After you got the dream, that's one thing, but then you need to break it into small bite-sized pieces, which to me was watching videos and basically getting the tricks down. Well, how does the method work? And back then we didn't have Google, we didn't have YouTube, so you had magazines, and in the magazines there was how-to sections. So Snowboarder magazine would have a how-to do a crossbone, Jamie Lynn style. And I would watch it and I would literally articulate step by step by step. Come into the jump, knees bent, pop off the lip, pivot at the hips. And as you pivot, grab between your legs, push the back foot out. You see what I'm doing? I'm visualizing, but I'm just learning this from a magazine, step by step. And then once I visualized it and I learned the steps, I actually went and practiced. And I practiced it over and over again until I had it perfect. Until that crossbone or that method looked exactly like Teddy Hawkinson's or like Jamie Lynn's. You may not know these names, but these are legends in snowboarding. But they were known for specific tricks and specific styles. They could only be accomplished if you actually focused every bit of your time, energy, and attention to making that trick perfect. So I did, folks. But then, at that point, that's great. You can get good at tricks. You can get good at riding. You can start winning some contests. But what happens next? The next thing is the realization that you are going to be a pro. It's not an idea anymore. In your mind, it's concreted. I am going to be a professional snowboarder. And when that moment switches, when that light switch goes off in your mind, and you start telling people, I'm going to be a pro, I'm going to be the next Teddy Hawkinson, the next Jamie Lynn, the next Craig Kelly, that's when everything starts to get difficult. Because at that very moment, when you actually crystallize your dream and you start telling other people what you're going to do, other people come out of the woodwork to break that dream down and actually beat you off of that pedestal, that good feeling, that dopamine, if you will. And I remember some of those people were my father. Some of those people were just my friends at school that said, you can't be a pro. You live in Buffalo, New York. How are you ever going to be a professional snowboarder? We don't have mountains. There's not big contests. Back then, the contests weren't X Games until later in my career. They were things like the Stimulon, the US Open. There was all sorts of, contests, but they were all held either in Vermont or out in Utah, Colorado. Well, I couldn't get to Utah and Colorado. I couldn't afford a plane ticket, and let alone, I was just a kid. My mom probably wouldn't even let me fly out there. So I got this idea. I said, all right, well, if I'm going to become a pro, I got to stop listening to these people. So literally a lot of my friends, because I was wrestling and I was trying to do the football thing, all of them were the ones that, they would just shit on my dreams. They would just say, no, you don't want to do that. Play football, become a varsity wrestler. I remember my wrestling coach. I was a JV wrestler and I was pretty good because I was short, stocky, and fast. And I was in good shape because I focused all my attention on conditioning so I could snowboard and hit jumps more. I remember him telling me one time, and it was so surreal to me. He knew I was a snowboarder. He knew I loved snowboarding more than anything, but my snowboarding on the weekends got in the way of the varsity competitions. So the wrestling competitions sometimes were held in other schools or other cities that they'd travel to, and they were always on weekends. And at the beginning of wrestling, it flowed into the snowboard season. And I remember this coach, trying to remember his name, but I remember him coming up to me and he said to me, he says, if you're going to we want you to move up to the varsity wrestling team. And if you're going to do that, you have to quit this snowboarding thing because it gets in the way of your wrestling. When he said that to me, I was just a wrestler just to get in shape for snowboarding. It was an off-season thing so that I was in good shape so when snowboarding happened, I could hike that hill faster, get more hits than my other, people that I was competing against. Then all of a sudden, this wrestling coach tells me that I should quit snowboarding. I think you know what happened. I quit wrestling. Just like that. That person got in the way of my dream. I eliminated that person. And they were upset. And all my other wrestling friends were just like, I can't believe you quit. What do you mean you can't believe I quit? This is my goal. This is my dream, not wrestling. Wrestling was just a means to keep me in shape to do my dream and my goal. That was it. Every person that got in my way, I had to make a decision. It's either my dream or their dream. It's either my dream or their failed reality, their ideas. Folks, that's called conformity. I wanted to create my destiny. My destiny was just at that point, become a pro snowboarder. And folks, there was a pivotal moment. I had been snowboarding at this point probably 4 good years. I had gotten sponsored by my local shop, and I was competing, wearing the jacket with their name on it. But I wasn't picked up by a factory snowboard company or something like the big pros were. I just had a shop sponsorship. I wasn't even an amateur at that point. I was just a shop rider. It was cool. I got discounts on boards and stuff, and I worked at the shop, so I had money, to pay for the snowboarding stuff. And in the summer, I'd work on a farm, and Jack's dad's farm, where we would basically pick, fruits and vegetables. And then I'd also go over to another one, and I'd clean out pig stalls. Listen, I did whatever it took, because those summer months were just so that I raised enough money. And I remember I had a little black box my mom got me. So remember, my mom never had any money, but my mom was a great saver. She had a little glass jar that she kept in her closet. And I remember my mom would always teach me this. When she needed a new lawnmower or she needed money for something, she taught me that she would take all of her extra change and put it in this glass jar. And one day she bought me this black box. I still have it today, and a little slide top. Just imagine a black box, a wooden box, and the top just slid back and forth. And she said, when you work at the farm, give me whatever money you don't need to put fuel in the dirt bike and whatever other things, and I'll save that for you like I saved for the lawnmower. I started doing that. And at the end of the summer, when I was working at various restaurants, at the farm, or working at the snowboard shop, which started in the fall, it's perfect. The snowboard shop, I would work after school during the week when I wasn't snowboarding. So I was in the moment. I was around snowboarding every second. I was around people that thought like me, not the people that I was wrestling with that didn't have the same dream as me. See, I had to change the network of people that I spent time with so that that network was in line with my goals. Do you understand what I'm telling you? These are the mindset changes. These are the lies people tell you. People want to steal your dream because it's not their dream. People want to take your dream away from you because they didn't succeed at their dreams and they don't think you should succeed at theirs. It's not always deceitful. Sometimes it is. Sometimes they think it's better for you. A lot of times your parents will be like, oh, I'll give up on this snowboarding dream because you should be working. You got to learn how to be a good worker so that you can get ahead and someday retire. Folks, don't let anyone stop you from your dreams. And if they do, if it's your family or your loved ones, you just got to put them in timeout. You just got to sit them down and tell them, this is my dream, not yours. Your dreams are your dreams. Mine are mine. Please support them. Otherwise, I'm going to go after them with or without you. Draw the line in the sand. You see, I changed my network of people that I surrounded myself with because it was in line with what I wanted. And as that happened, things started progressing. I started winning more contests. I started being in the right circles of people that knew how to get me into the contest. And then what happened is I had this pivotal moment where if I was really going to make this push to become a pro snowboarder, go from a shop rider to an amateur to a pro, I had to make a big push. So me and Ben worked at the snowboard shop together. We decided that all the big contests that the big Scandinavian riders and all the factory riders rode at were in Vermont. It was the USSA Snowboard Series, and it always took place in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, which I'm in New York, Buffalo, New York. So that was roughly between a 6 to 8 hour drive. So what me and Ben decided to do, and we did this at the shop, we decided that what we were going to do is every one of these contests, on a Friday night, we're going to drive all night long. And we were going to arrive at 5 or 6 in the morning, right before registration started at 8 o'clock. And what we would do is we'd catch a couple hours of sleep. And then we'd go in and we'd register, and then we'd hike up the hill because we didn't have enough money to buy lift tickets. Now, today you couldn't get away with that, but back then, this is what I did. I was in shape. Remember, I was so used to, I had that habit that during the off season, I would run and I would get myself in shape. And I did it a lot of different ways, but I did it so that when I got to the snowboard season, I had enough stamina, enough energy that I could hike the hill because I didn't have enough money to buy the lift tickets. It was very rare that I had saved enough money during the summer months that I could afford my car insurance, the fuel, and all the other little things that I had to do. We didn't have cell phones back then, we had pagers, but let alone then be able to afford $50, $60 lift tickets. God, they're hundreds today, but that just wasn't in the budget. So what me and Ben figured out is, well, if we didn't have the money for the tickets, we could just hike. Most of the snowboard contests were half pipes and slopestyle things, but snowboarding wasn't mainstream. So the resorts would just put those at the bottom of the hill, way off on the side. So for us, we just had to hike up just a little ways up the hill, hit the half pipe, walk back up the half pipe and do it again. And we got in really good shape. That's what we did. But we would drive on a Friday night. My mom hated it. She was so nervous because, you know, what if we fall asleep? She'd make me this big cup of coffee, this thermos of coffee that we would drink, and we'd drive all night. And I did this weekend after weekend. And we'd get there Saturday, we'd compete Saturday, we'd find friends, you know, we made friends and we'd sleep on their couches. And then the next morning we'd get up and compete again. We'd stop it for dinner, you know, somewhere on the way home when we got tired, and we'd drive all the way home Sunday so that Monday we could be back in school and back at the shop working. I did this for years, folks. And as I did this and I stayed focused and I kept my network in line with my goals, what started happening is I started getting better rankings as the rider. And then I remember there was one day back at my local resort, they had just built a brand new snowboard park. It was revolutionary for Buffalo. And it had buses that were buried in the snow and all sorts of jumps. And Burton Snowboards, the biggest snowboard company of the time back then, and even today, had two riders. And I had learned that these two guys, Blair and Shane, were from Buffalo, New York. And I'm like, oh my God, there's two pros, big pros that are in the videos we're watching that were Buffalo guys that made it. They didn't live in Buffalo anymore. They'd moved to California, but now I had a real case study of somebody that had done it. And then I found out that they were going to have these two riders there with a professional photographer shooting for a video. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a dream come true. So I made sure that I was at the resort that day. And I remember being up in the snowboard park and I saw these two riders decked out in Burton gear. I didn't know who they were. And I saw them hitting this stuff and I'm like, oh my God, they're so good. Now I was a good rider, but these guys were, you know, in my eyes, they were superstars. And I watched them and I sat by the jumps when the filmers were there, out of the way, and I watched them and I high-fived them and they'd come up and they were super friendly and they told me, hey, come on up and hit the jump with us. And I did that. And, you know, I was a pretty good rider. So they noticed it like, oh, you're pretty good. But at that time, something else happened. What I didn't know is there was a scout, which is a team manager, okay, for one of the other companies, not for Burton, but there was a team manager there. And that would happen every once in a while when there was a big photo shoot. Team managers would show up and look at the talent that was there, because it wasn't just Blair and Shane hitting this. There was a bunch of other riders too. And I just was doing my thing and I was having a ton of fun doing great tricks. And I remember he pulled me aside and he said, hey, I'd love to, you know, talk to you more about riding for XXX snowboards. Now, at this time, I was a shop rider. I had a pro form deal with K2 snowboards, which means I got K2 boards at cost. But now this guy, his name was Chad. Chad had offered me an amateur sponsorship with this company called XXX Snowboards. And they were going to give me snowboards. They were going to give me gloves and stickers and outerwear later. And I eventually took the deal and I started riding with XXX. Well, at this time, I'd been competing and I'd been winning. And I ignored all the naysayers and I took all those negative people that were muddying up my mindset. I got them out of my life. And I started, now I had a purpose. I had a sponsor that I had to prove something to. So I started winning all the contests. I started actually showing up to photo shoots because now I kind of saw that that's the thing to do. When there's photo shoots that you hear of, you drive and you go to the photo shoot. So I drive to Vermont, not for a contest, but because there was a big photo shoot and I'd just be in the right place at the right time. And eventually I went pro for this company. And then XXX unfortunately went out of business a few years later, but then that team manager moved to another company, which was Limited, and Limited then signed me on. And then Limited was a Toronto-based company, and I was riding amateur for them. So I was pro for XXX, but they went out of business. So now I went to Limited, but there was no room on the pro team. So I was the AM team, which was still really good. I got to surround myself with the pros for Limited snowboards, and I went to their offices in Toronto. They gave me boards. It was awesome. Such an awesome time. But I was doing really well at this point. And then I remember when Limited sold to another company, I no longer had a sponsorship. You see, I'd get one And then that company would go belly up. But then that team manager, who was always true to me, that was that one person. If you've ever watched the movie Rudy, remember he had that janitor who always believed in him. Well, this team manager always believed in me. And he went to another company called Option. Option NFA was the name of the company. NFA was the clothing line, and Option Snowboards was the snowboard company. And at that moment, I had my big break. I'd been doing really well. I was ranked, I think, like number 13 in the country, for USSA. I was competing all over. I was filming with some of which today, like this guy Tim and this other guy Kevin, they're today some of the biggest photographers and videographers in the industry. But back then they were at the early stages of their career. But I had been filming with them out in Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire as I was an amateur rider. So you can see, folks, this is many, many years that I stayed focused to this. Many, many years of people telling me that this was a false reality, this wasn't going to happen, this was a joke, and that I shouldn't be doing this, and my mom being nervous and lots of things happening, but I just stayed focused. And I had a big break. Option offered me a pro contract, and I remember it was the first contract I'd ever signed. I literally had to create resumes of my, and I never did a resume. I still have all these things. It's so awesome to look at them. And I gave my resume to Option, and they loved it. I had all my winnings on there. I printed off all the USSA stats, and I had a bunch of photos that had been done by these photographers back then. They were on little negatives, like I can't remember what they were called, but we would show them, and they put them on a light board. Things were different back then, but it was still just as exciting. And when I went pro, it was a whole different level. It'd be like a college football player then becoming a pro football player, getting drafted. And then all of a sudden they're such a good player as a college, but they're mediocre in the pro world. That was me. I was top of the game as an amateur rider, winning all the contests. But now all of a sudden I stepped into the pro level contest. And I would show up to contests that were sponsored by Red Bull. This is kind of the time when Monster was just coming into it. And all these big sponsored events, Mountain Dew did this whole series. And I'd be there with all these pros. The Cass brothers were there. And I mean, there was so many names, Ross Powers. And the level they were at was far superior to where I was. But I had the ability to rise to that level. I just had to be in that environment where I was riding with them. Because when you're in an environment where you're at the top, you don't know where else to go. You can only push yourself so hard and so far when everybody else is below you. But when you step into the next realm, which I did in the pro world, now everybody was better. So now I had to up my skills. I had to now go out there and actually be more resourceful and do what others are unwilling to do even more to get to that level. And that's what it did. I worked harder. I trained better. I had better resources. I had people to now look at and admire, and we'd go and we'd practice with pros. So I'm riding in this pro world, and I'm riding with Cass, Maddie Cass, and Danny Cass, who was just a little kid, but I'm watching them do tricks I'd never seen. So then once I saw it, I practiced it. And then I would take it back home and I would just drill and practice, but the level of the tricks were up. They were way more complicated, way more dangerous. So that's when I ended up learning that you can get a trampoline and you could tape the edges of your snowboard with duct tape so it didn't rip through the trampoline and you'd bounce. So all summer long, that's what I did. Me and a couple of my friends would go out and we'd bounce on the trampoline every day with our snowboards, learning flips, learning backflips and rodeo flips and off-axis spins, which are called quirks. And we learned all those on a trampoline. And then when the snow came, I'll never forget the first snowflake that falls. We get so excited. You're just like a kid in a candy store. And then my mindset was in the right place. My network was in the right place. Now all I had to do is go out, take all that stuff, that feeling of practicing over and over and over again on a trampoline, and I just had to apply it to snow. And obviously you can only imagine, like, yes, it hurt. We'd build a jump and we'd mess up the landing with a bunch of extra snow so that when we'd first try it, usually it ended with landing on your back or your face, broken nose many times. This is when the injuries started to come into play, because when you were a pro, it's a different level. I got hurt as an amateur, but never serious. Now I started having serious injuries. And all these tricks that I was practicing started on a trampoline. They started watching a video, getting an idea, or seeing one of the riders the year before do it, practicing all summer long, coming back, applying that to the snow and actually making it a reality. And then what I really honed in on is I was a big competitive rider back then, because competitions were kind of where it was at. And I was winning contests on a very consistent basis. I was always usually top 3, top 5. But what I started realizing is trick to competition riding wasn't having a whole bunch of really crazy tricks. It was having a good competition line, meaning having set tricks that you could do every day with your eyes closed, that you could do in a repetitious manner on the jumps and the handrails in the course, and that you could land them consistently, and your style was unmatched, and you weren't sloppy in the air. So there was so many criteria. You'd look at the judging format, you know, and there was different things, amplitude, style. There was all sorts of different criteria that they would judge you on. And all you would do, is all I did, is I said, all right, well, if that's what they judge on, I just have to make sure that each one of those things is perfect. I have to go high enough. I have to have rotations in there. I have to grab the board. I have to have style. I can't be doing things sloppy. A lot of the riders were sloppy. They had big tricks, but they were sloppy. I just watched videos. I saw the best smooth riders. I keep going back to Teddy Hawkinson because he had one of the best styles. So did Jamie Lynn. And I just modeled everything I did off what they did. And then I basically just practiced over and over again. And in doing this, you see this is how the reality happened, folks. But you know, so many people that have dreams and they chase their dreams and they get themselves in all these right places, they get the right network. There's one other thing that I always had to deal with as a pro snowboarder and on the journey to being a pro snowboarder, and that was called fear. Fear is something that is very difficult for me to articulate to you how you can handle fear. You see, fear isn't real, but in our minds, we make fear very real. Because at the moment, when you're thinking about crashing, you know the consequences now because you've dealt with them. You've crashed enough times to know, hey, that hurt. Hey, that could have went really bad. Hey, that could have paralyzed me. Hey, I could have blew my knee out. You understand those things. So you face fear. And let me tell you a story about one of the scariest moments in my career. It was right when I had become a pro snowboarder with option. They invited me to this contest in New Hampshire. And I remember it was a gloomy day. We got there, it was pouring rain. The contest day, I woke up really early because I'm like, I got to practice. Like, we don't have big jumps like this back home because I knew it was a big jump. That was what the jump, the contest was known for. I knew it was a giant jump, and we didn't have giant jumps back home, but I knew I could figure it out. So I remember I got there and I got up early and I'm on the lift, and down at the bottom, it's foggy, it's gloomy. So I'm on the lift, I'm going up nice and slow. It's so quiet that early in the morning. You're in your own space. You're so excited. I'm a pro rider. I've done it. This is a huge opportunity. If I win this contest, like, I'm going to make money because it was a cash purse. My sponsors are going to be happy. Maybe I'll get a better contract because contracts went, you know, back then it was year after year. Every year they'd up your contract and up your pay or up your incentives. And I remember getting halfway up and the lift kind of comes over this knoll and the fog started dissipating because the higher up the fog was down low. And I remember coming up at this point and I looked over to my left and I saw one of the scariest things to me at that time. I saw the jump. It was huge. It was ginormous. It had fear and danger written all over it. And I remember looking at it and I seen all the people, the park crews fixing it up. I saw the photographer setting up and I'm like, oh my God. At that moment, I went from an excited, newly, honored pro snowboarder to a fearful snowboarder. And I remember getting to the top. All I could think about is, oh my God, can I hit that? I don't think I can hit that. I don't think that's too big. I've never hit anything like that. And you're walking around at the top of the course. Other riders show up. And we always had headphones on, right? We'd be cruising around and we'd have our giant headphones on like you see me with right now. And we'd be like listening to our music. Back then it was punk rock or something like that. And you're listening to it and everybody's like, your head's down and everybody's thinking the same thing. Oh my God, did you see it, Joe? But nobody's talking about it. It's just like, hey man, fear. All of us were scared. And I remember most snowboard contests, there has to be a guinea pig. And the guinea pig is no more than one of the riders has to hit the jump first just to test it out, make sure it's safe, make sure everything's good, and then the contest can start. And in these pro contests, the amount of riders in them, not like today, there was a very small amount, maybe 15 riders were invited, to this contest. The rest were spectators, 15, 20. And I remember we'd always play this game, Rochambeau, and a couple of people, would kind of step up to the plate and basically say, all right, well, hey, listen, and I was always the one that stepped up because I thought I'd win Rochambeau and not have to hit the jump first. But this one I lost. I went rock. Somebody else went paper. That means I lost and I had to hit this jump. So you roll up to the starting ramp of the jump, which is just a big drop in, and you're staring at the face of the jump, this giant face that you're going to take off and be launched 30, 40 feet in the air. And you're staring at this thing and you're thinking to yourself, if I go too fast and I overshoot that landing, which is about 70 feet, I could land flat. I could land halfway down. That's like falling 40 feet to the flat ground. That could get you paralyzed, could blow your knees out, could put you out for the entire season. But then if you get scared and you check too many times, which I've seen happen a bunch, and I've done it a bunch, if you check your speed too much and you don't have enough speed to take it to the landing, you take off and you smash into the backside of that jump. And the same thing, become paralyzed, you can get severely injured, blow your knees out. And you're thinking through all these things and your fear is just going up and up, and you're starting to think, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't hit this. Maybe this just isn't worth it. Maybe I should just kind of say, hey guys, I'm not going to compete today. But there's a lot at stake here. And then the starter walks up. He's got his headphones on, talking to the judges down the bottom, and he says, all right, Chris, you ready? And you look back and you say, yes, but you're not ready. But at that very moment, you have to make a decision. Now, I don't care if this is entrepreneurship. I don't care if this is a business. I don't care if this is a new job interview. I don't care if this is you making that big step to becoming what you have always wanted to. We all have to make a decision. And that decision is leap. And at that very moment, I leaped. And for the next, what felt like forever, but it was just split seconds. Picking up speed, heading to the face of that jump. And then you're in the air. And at that very moment, when you take off of that jump, all the fear is gone. At that very moment, all those years of practice, all those videos you've watched, all those times you've practiced this trick on the trampoline and on the snow, instinct kicks in. Your practice, your training, and everything you've done to get you to this moment kicks in, and you do your trick and you land and right away. At that moment, fear is completely gone from your life. Fear is gone from your mind. Fear is gone from your heart. And it's overjoyed with excitement. The smile on your face is ear to ear. You're just so happy because now fear is gone and now everything is possible. And the next thing through your mind is get me up to the top of that hill so that I can do this trick and that trick, because now the world is yours. The contest is yours. And now all it comes down to is who does the best tricks, who puts down the best run, who puts it down to take the gold that day. It's not the gold that matters at that moment. It's the fact that you leaped and you overcame fear. Folks, I've had to do this so many times in snowboarding. I've had to overcome fear. I've had to overcome objections. I've had to overcome the lack of resources. And some of the other pro riders came from wealthy families that just footed the bill for them to be everywhere and any time that they wanted to be. But that wasn't the case for me. I had to do what others were unwilling to do. I had to face the music and go out there and do it the hard way. But folks, I did it. I had a long career as a pro snowboarder. And the lies that I was told my whole life, that you can't do this, that's not possible because you don't have the resources. That's not possible because you don't live in an area where the mountains are, and you don't live in an area where all the other pros live. But I had those two guys that blazed the path, Blair and Shane. So all I really had to do is just have the dream. I had to dream it. I had to believe it. And then I was able to achieve it. And all of you can do the same thing. I have taken that exact same formula. That formula of getting rid of the hate in your life, getting rid of the people that want to bring you down, surrounding yourself with the right people and the right mindset that have your goals in mind or are just chasing the same thing you are. And I've applied that to business. And I'm not going to say I haven't failed. I've failed in snowboarding, had countless injuries, big injuries. An injury took me out as a pro snowboarder when I was actually 34 years old. That was a long career. I was probably ready to go at that point. Not really. I mean, you just don't ever want to give that up. But sometimes life has a different path for you. But everything in life will be played out exactly how you allow it to play out. Because whatever you ask of life, life will give you. But the second you doubt it, the second you come up with reasons and excuses and tell yourself you can't do this, you shouldn't do this, it's too risky, life will take it right away from you. See, again, let me repeat that. Whatever you ask of life, life will gladly give you. But if you start believing the lies that are told to you, if you start allowing your mindset to be muddied up by the naysayers, muddied up by the tricksters, the scammers, muddied up by the people that have failed dreams, that try to get you to conform to their failed realities, the second you start going to that side, all of your dreams will die. Your dreams will be stripped from you because you've lost focus. Remember the key things. First, you got to have the dream. All of you have a dream. Then you got to believe that it's possible. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. You got to firmly believe it. And then you got to go out there and do what everybody else is unwilling to do. You got to do the impossible, and you got to achieve your dreams. Each and every one of you can do this. I know you can because I did it. And I feel like I had a whole bunch of things stacked up against me for achieving that one goal. Now, everything in your life will be very similar to that. You're going to have resistance. You're going to have failures. You're going to have setbacks. You're going to have people telling you can't do things. Stop listening to them. Stop blaming other people for unforeseen things that happen in your life. Stop blaming other people when something doesn't work. Oh, this doesn't work because that person screwed me. Too bad. Deal with it. It's your problem. It's not their problem. Maybe the problem started because of something they did, but it's your problem. You got to deal with it. Folks, the cavalry's not coming to save the day. It's you that's going to save the day. It's you that's going to allow your dreams to happen. It's you that's going to allow that perfect day to happen, that dream to materialize, that vision that you've thought about for so long to actually happen. Stop believing the lies you're taught and start believing in yourself. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I don't get a chance to talk about that journey. There's a lot more to it, but you got the best parts. So go out there and remember, it's not the knowledge that you get from this podcast or any other podcast. It's the application of knowledge. So go out there and apply this knowledge. And I gave you some motivation to practice drifting away from traditional car buying. Grab a copy of this booklet by just simply applying that knowledge, going to chrisnagel.com and click on the Wealth Webinar Series, and we will send you the ebook for that. And you can then learn how to get all the Audis that you want, like me, and get the money back for all of them. Thank you all for joining me for today's solo episode. We will see you next time on the Real Estate Money School. Until then.